Hello, everybody. Welcome again to another edition of the GD Report. I am D, and this is
Gee,
the G Man. Hey, I almost got that backwards, which is not good.
yeah,
Not a
right,
good thing to start with.
right.
So we're going to do a kind of a round robin discussion tonight. State of the race. Here we are, the last week in August, and we've got about I think we're setting about 70 days till the election.
Yep.
And so we'll just do an overall state of the race. Then we're going to talk about a couple of states in particular. And then I've got a wild card topic in the middle that I'm going to throw with the G-Man and have some fun with. He has no idea what's coming. And
Right.
I think he's going to love it.
Yep.
So
See that.
anyway, first of all, overall state of the race, we've got right now we're in the middle of the Republican National Convention. We had the Democratic National Convention last week. Looks like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris got a little bit of a bounce out of the convention. The last national poll I saw of likely voters showed their ticket up by 10 points, which is pretty close to where he was. It's not, I don't think that there's the traditional bounce that a lot of the conventions used to get, because I feel like, particularly in this election cycle, a lot of people are baked in already. They're locked in.
Yep.
They know where they are. So there's a small competition for undecideds in. Now, some states vary, and I know the G-Man's got some of those to talk about tonight, but I think looking for a traditional balance, because that's when people used to really zero in and focus on the election. I think with social media and the way people get their information now, that people are a lot more informed and following a lot closer earlier in the cycle. So I don't expect traditional bounce. There could be some bounce out of the Republican convention. What I've seen so far, and I'll be honest, I haven't watched a ton of it. It seems pretty solidly towards their base. It doesn't seem like that they're doing a whole lot to reach out to other groups or undecideds necessarily. I know on the Democratic convention they had a lot of Republican speakers, a lot of folks that were geared towards trying to reach those never Trumpers, those moderates, and maybe people who feel a little bit left behind. So felt like there's a little bit more effort last week from the Democrats on that side. I feel like Trump is really trying to shore up his base, and of course we knew it would be all about Trump.
Right. Well, they they have had at least one Democrat on, black former National Football League player, talking about his experience, how he lost everything when he left the league to start a business, and how basically the Republicans have been there for him, and how Trump's policies have really benefited black people, and how the economy was booming along before circumstances out of his control, and just basically the things, the spin that you would expect the Republicans to put on the current national situation, which is basically all they can do. I mean, the country's a mess from top to bottom, and it happened on their watch, and there's no denying that. So right now they're just trying to spin it the best way they can, and try to convince people that Trump's the guy that can put it back together. Which
I think their wish is that the electorate has a time machine and can go back to January of this year and just think about how things were in January, not think about how things have been the last 6, 7, 8 months.
right.
And it's going to be a big challenge for them because, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but I don't think we've seen the worst of times yet, because we're going to see a lot more people cycling through unemployment and going. This will be the first solid month. Many of the folks are not going to get the federal additional unemployment subsidy. So we're going to have a lot more people defaulting on loans, defaulting on their rent, not being able to pay their rent and those kinds of things. So, and then on top of that, the big looming thing to me is the airline industry and what they've already prepared. I saw American Airlines. It was something like 25 or 30,000 jobs that they had already anticipated that in October or maybe as early as September, at least a furlough, if not out and out layoffs.
Right.
For the airline industry. So it's going to be a tough row to hoe, just to tell people, hey, just go back in time and just remember how good things were, and just click your heels 3 times and just imagine that once we get past this election, everything's going to be better, because we've got a challenge. Whoever wins is going to have some big challenges.
Well, I remember Trump in 2016, standing in front of the camera and pointing his finger and saying, "I alone can fix it." Well,
Right.
I think it's going to take a lot more than Mr. Trump to fix the mess that we're in right now. So,
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. So it'll be interesting to see how he finishes up. Everything about his presidency has been non-traditional and non-conformist to any kind of norms that have existed. His convention's been no different. In typical fashion, he's been the center of attention every night, spoken
right.
every day, and Biden kind of stuck to the traditions of appearances here and there, but his big speech, he saved it for the last night. And I thought he gave the speech of his career. When you listen to it, he did a great job. I think it knocked Trump back on his heels a little bit because of his whole argument about Sleepy Joe and how he doesn't have his abilities about him. He gave a damn good speech. So we've got in fact, it was so, it rattled him so much. I saw today that Trump is trying to start a new rumor that, and I know you're going to think I'm making this up, but he is trying to start a rumor in the right-wing media that Biden must have taken some type of medication to be that alert and that good during his speech, and that he wants drug testing before the debates. So,
Well, if I were Joe, I would take him up on that, and I would want to know what kind of drugs President Trump has been taking.
yeah, and Don Jr. as well.
Right.
All right, so that's kind of an overall statement. Let's jump to the great state of Kansas. Not a lot of people know this. I think I mentioned this on the podcast before, but I was actually born in Kansas.
Right.
I never lived there. I always make that clear, but I was born just across the border in Kansas from the farm my parents still live on today in Oklahoma. So I know, G-Man, you've got some intel on Kansas. Tell us what you found out about that.
Yeah. So there's one survey company that I trust. There's 100 or more out there that get cited in the media, and these guys kind of fly below the radar. You'll hear about them every now and then, but their methodology is really solid. They have a strong track record of calling races reliably. And it's called Survey USA, and you can get to their website at surveyusa.com. And they've got some great data out there right now about 2 states we're going to discuss tonight, Georgia and Kansas. And the way their polls work is their clients hire them, and their clients are mostly TV stations. So TV stations will hire them to kind of get a feel of what's going on and to inform their viewers of how the races are shaping up. So this poll was dated August 5th through the 8th. I'm not the 9th, August 5th through the 9th. And, they asked questions about, like, how certain are you to vote? Well, in this one, 100% certain is 75%, and likely to vote is another 13%. So you've got 88% that are for sure, almost positive going to be voting. So that should mean a high turnout in Kansas. Then it said, if you're going to vote for president right now, who would you vote for? And right now, Biden's kind of got an uphill battle there. He's trailing Trump 48 to 41%. And that's not the news. I mean, Kansas is a fairly reliable red state. But the big news is Democrat Barbara Boullier is trailing Republican Roger Marshall 46 to 44%, and that's well within the margin of error of 3.5%. So that race could turn into something for the Democrats if Barbara's momentum keeps going.
Absolutely. The Republicans dodged a little bit of a bullet on that one, or in the primary, because of Chris Kobach was originally favored to win that. And of course, people know him from his anti-immigration policies and his failed gubernatorial race last time, which
Right.
gave him Governor Laura Kelly, who despite a lot of challenges in a state that a lot like the states that we live in, and the fact that there's large metros, but a large rural population as well. Her popularity is still pretty strong in that state. And she made some tough decisions. She was one of the early states to close their public schools during COVID, and it was the right decision. It was a smart decision. But in a lot of rural areas, it was a tough decision, and tough for that to happen. But she did that. I think Bollier is positioned well. I think the state of Kansas has always been like you said, a Republican state, but it's been a different type of Republican. Even Bob Dole, he kind of got known for the whole thing in the 90s with Bill Clinton, as far as being the opposition with Newt Gingrich. But Bob Dole had a long history in the Senate of being a compromiser, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in the way where the Senate used to work, where the House would pass a bill, the Senate would pass a bill, and then it would actually go to conference, and they'd work out the differences to come up with a final bill. Right. Dole had that reputation of being somebody who could work across the aisle. You had Nancy Kassebaum as a senator as well during that era. And her father, Alf Landon, was the presidential candidate that actually ran on the Republican ticket against Roosevelt, I believe.
Yeah,
but
twice, I think.
Yeah, they've always had that tradition of almost populist Republicans. So it's not been a real hardcore right-wing brand of Republicanism. It's been centrist kind of Republicanism. And so I know the state has, when Chris Kobach was Attorney General of the state, they also had an old friend of yours, Gunner, as the governor at the time, Sam Brownback.
Right.
He put a lot of policies in. One thing about Sam Brownback, I'm not a huge fan of his.
Neither am I.
But he was a lot like Tom Coburn, the late senator from Oklahoma, in the fact that he actually believed what he said. And so he put a lot of policies in place in Kansas to limit spending and to cut what he called government waste. And it ended up being so draconian that it pushed their schools to a state of ill repair. It pushed a lot of state agencies with a lot of struggles. And Kansas has pushed back on that quite a bit. And so there's a strong chance that Bollier wins the Senate seat. There's also a really strong candidate around Wichita in one of the congressional districts that she's got a really strong chance to pick that seat up too. We'll talk about that on an upcoming podcast about some of the hot congressional races coming up. But I would not be surprised if election night that Bollier comes in as the next senator from Kansas.
Yeah, that would be good for the Democrats. Let's flip over to Georgia. Now, this poll comes in from the 6th to the 8th of August, so it's a bit dated as well. Now, they didn't ask if you're likely to vote. They basically jumped right into it. Is your opinion of Trump favorable? Trump has about a 42% favorable rating down there. But and Biden has a 36% favorable rating. So am I looking at that correct? Yeah. So Trump has extremely favorable is 29, favorable is 14, neutral is 10%. Biden is 16 and 20, so it's 36%.
We have to get our research team to do better work here.
Right. Yeah. So I'm just looking at the poll here.
Yeah. No. Georgia's going to be an interesting state to follow because the presidential election will be. I think it's going to be very close. I think Biden has a really good chance of picking up here. You got the 2 open Senate seats we've talked about before, and then the other big thing you got hanging over the whole state is just the utter contempt that so many people have for Brian Kemp, their governor, right now.
Right. Yeah.
And so the way he went after Atlanta and Savannah, in the standpoint that wanted to restrict their rights to be able to put mask ordinances in.
Yep.
Whenever both those cities were the larger cities in Atlanta or in Georgia that had African American mayors. There's just such an undertone to everything Brian Kemp does. And
Right.
so it'll be interesting. I know the Atlanta Falcons, I believe it's the Falcons, have opened their Mercedes Dome as a polling site. And so there's a lot of push in Atlanta to really get the vote out. And with the 2 open Senate seats, then and the gubernatorial race will start the day after the election as well. And
Right.
I'll be interested to see how quickly Stacey Abrams gets back in that.
Right. Well, the interesting thing about this poll is that even though Biden has a lower favorability at this point, at least when this poll was taken, when they ask voters who they were going to vote for, Biden has a 2-point lead, 46 to 44%. So we very well could see on election night that Georgia gets put in the Democrat column, and that very well could be the first chink in the armor of that impenetrable Republican Southern strategy.
Yeah, I think if we see Georgia and North Carolina both go early in the night, which we'll see if anything goes early with the mail-in votes this year and the chicanery happening with that.
Right.
But we see those 2 states go, it's going to be a long night for Trump. You know, the pivot that Trump's trying to make right now is, and your poll right there that you mentioned, it really backs it up. If this is a referendum on Donald Trump, I think Trump loses big time.
I do too.
If he can pivot out of that and make it a referendum on Joe Biden or anything other than him, and he's tried. It's interesting this week when the parts of the convention I've seen is they've tried to continue to position him as an outsider, which is interesting considering the guy's been in the presidency for almost 4 years.
Right.
You want to call him the outsider, but it'll be interesting because that poll really just backs it up that if they're going to vote based on whether they like Trump or don't like Trump, Trump loses.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, the parts of the convention that I've seen, and I haven't seen all of it, but I've seen a decent amount. And, what I've seen is they're basically trying to portray Biden as the person who's going to kowtow to these extremists that are ruining the country, that are, causing these riots, back and forth in these quote unquote democratically run cities. And then, they're basically ignoring the fact that a lot of the people being arrested are white right-wing radicals that are there basically stirring it up.
Yeah, we saw that in Kenosha, Wisconsin last night when the shooter that killed 2 people and injured another person was a white supremacist from Illinois that had come across the border, 17 years old.
Yep.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Their goal is, and I always love when they try to push, they say, Joe Biden's going to be a puppet of AOC or he's going to be a puppet of Bernie Sanders. And, when I hear that, it makes me chuckle because I say, what are they going to do? Torture people with free health care or with better schools or with, decreases in military spending when we all know, anybody who's independently voiced and has nothing to do with whether you support the troops or not, knows there's so much waste in the military budget that we spend. I think it's like 200 times more than our next closest army. Then there's plenty of room there to be able to make some changes that could allow us to have the things that we really needed infrastructure-wise and otherwise here in the country. So it's great, interesting facts from the great states of Kansas and Georgia. So told you I had a wild card topic. So I want to get your opinion, G-Man, on something that happened off the coast of Connecticut this week. And I know you're trying to figure out what it is, but anybody that in the office pool that had Steve Bannon as the next person to be arrested and in the Trump campaign, the annals of the Trump campaign, was lucky this week because Steve Bannon was arrested. And actually, interestingly enough, I believe it was the Postal Service of the post office that actually
Right.
made the arrest,
Yeah.
which is
On a,
just what a juxtaposition with everything going on with the post office right
yeah.
now.
On a $28 million yacht
Yeah, exactly right.
that
So
was owned by a Chinese billionaire.
exactly. So tell us why. I'll start with this question: why are so many compatriots, former campaign major players, and associates of Donald Trump, why are they continuing to be arrested and indicted?
Well, mostly because they do illegal things. I think the interesting thing about the Bannon case too is I believe that information came out of that Senate report that basically validated the Russian interference that Trump continues to say is a hoax and a witch hunt, which is interesting because the Republican-led Senate released that finding, and I know they put other people's names besides Bannon into the hopper of people that needed to be investigated and or arrested. So it'll be interesting to see in the next few days, weeks, if you will, who else gets pinched.
Yeah, I thought it was really ironic that what he got arrested for was stealing funds from a nonprofit that he set up where he encouraged MAGA supporters to give money to fund the border wall.
Right.
And so he stole money from people who were the most tried and true supporters of Donald Trump
Yeah.
and gave money to this fund. And if people can't see through that to see the fallacies of some of the things that they're pushing, I mean, come on. I
Well,
mean,
and we did. Go ahead.
there's even a video out there of Bannon bragging about potentially stealing the money, and it's, to me, it's a pretty cut. What I've read about it is a pretty cut and dried case. There's money that moved from the account of that a nonprofit political action committee to Steve Bannon's account on a check and financial instruments that were made out to Steve Bannon and signed by Steve Bannon. So it's going to be, he's facing 4 to 6 years, I think, in prison unless he cuts a deal and has information that prosecutors might want. And something tells me he does have that information.
Yeah.
Question is if he wants to give it up or if he wants to try to wait out getting a presidential pardon.
Right. Well, I'm sure, if we know anything about Trump, he'll do what he can to protect himself. My guess is, since we don't know where all that money went to, we only know that about $1 million of the 25 million went to Bannon, and his co-conspirator got less than that. So I'm wondering where the rest of the money is. My guess is we might find that in a Trump family account somewhere. But whether Bannon wants to give that up or not remains to be seen. So.
Very good. Well, hey, another great episode of the GD Report. Appreciate everybody watching. I'll say it again. Make sure you get registered to vote. 70 days out. It's an important election. I believe in the next week or so, early voting is going to start in some states. And
Yep.
So if voting has started, please, with everything going on right now, and if you're gonna vote by mail, please get your ballot ordered and get it turned in as quickly as you can.
I do have one clarification I'd like to make. In our last podcast or the previous one before that, we were talking about mail-in voting, and I said in Colorado, I thought we still had some polling places where you could actually go vote in person. We do not. We are an all mail-in state. So.
Well, according to the president, then that would mean that everything's a fraud in Colorado, right?
Right, but not in Florida. Florida
Right.
does it right. They were saying the other day. So.
Yeah, well, he was not too shy about saying Florida has a Republican governor, so they do it right. So.
Right.
Well, hey, great as always, G-Man, and again, appreciate everybody listening and watching, and we'll look forward to next time.
Sounds great. See you then.